Hi, this is Terry Farrell, Dax from Deep Space Nine, and welcome to Random Trek.
Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Random Trek. I am your captain, Christopher Ingle, joined this week by my first officer, the man who absolutely would put me on trial if I had some gross negligence at the con. It's Commander Brennan, the Mystical Mar. Brennan, how are we doing?
Not guilty.
Not guilty, yes. Today we are taking a look at the original series, Season 1, Episode 20, Court Martial. We love a good trial episode on this show.
Yes.
And this is no different.
Yes, we do indeed.
Yes. Brennan, what do we think about this episode going into it? I love a good TOS. The TOS sometimes is hit or miss. But this really felt overall, as a character point, strong for Kirk.
I think so, yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah. I really love the...
I love a good courtroom drama.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of variety in Kirk's approaches here, which is really great, and we'll get into that. Let's break down what happens in the episode, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So the Enterprise is at Starbase 11 for repairs after encountering an ion storm. During the storm, Kirk was forced to eject a research pod that contained the records officer, Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Finney, in order to prevent the destruction to the ship. The search party from the ship was unable to find Finney. So Commodore Stone, who is the commander of the base, reviews the ship's records and discovers that Kirk ejected the pod while the ship was at yellow alert and not red alert, as Kirk claims. So he says, all right, Kirk, I'm sorry, but I have to charge you with perjury, and you may be subject to a court-martial for gross negligence. Ooh. So Stone first starts by interviewing Kirk privately, asking about his history with Finney, and it turns out Kirk and Finney do have a past. They served with Finney aboard the USS Republic, and he reported a mistake that Finney had made, and it caused Finney to get reprimanded and moved to the bottom of the promotion list. And ever since, Finney has blamed Kirk for slowing his advancement. Commodore Stone asks Kirk to say, look, just step down on your own. Just go behind a desk, step down as captain of the Enterprise, and we can sweep this all away. But Kirk disputes the allegations, and he demands a trial. So, at the trial, Spock and McCoy defend Kirk's character. But they do testify that Kirk had reason to resent Finney, and that it was impossible for the ship's computer logs to be wrong. The ship is correct. Okay. And Finney's daughter, Jamie is pretty frustrated at Kirk already, but she's looking on pretty distraught. Kirk's attorney, Samuel T. Cogley. By the way, I would go to Samuel T. Cogley, attorney at law. Absolutely, I would watch this.
Yes, I would.
He's Kirk's attorney, but he puts him on the stand. And again, Kirk's testimony contradicts the computer's logs. There is a visual record that shows that Kirk ejected the pod while the ship was on yellow alert. During a recess, Kirk tells Spock that he's kind of giving up a little bit. And he says, you might be able to beat your next captain at chess, which gives Spock an idea. Spock discovers that he is able to beat the Enterprise computer multiple times at 3D chess, despite giving the computer all of his knowledge about chess, and reasonably, the computer should not be able to beat him, or he should not be able to be beat by the computer. It should be a draw. But it doesn't happen that way. He concludes that the computer must have been tampered with, as the best outcome should have been a draw. Spock arrives at the last minute before the court can issue a verdict. And Cogley makes an impassioned speech on the rights of man versus a machine, and he demands that the court be reconvened aboard the Enterprise. While they're there, Spock says, listen, only 3 people would have the ability to alter computer records aboard the Enterprise. Kirk, Mr. Spock and the records officer, Finney. Cogley suggests that Finney isn't dead. So what they do is they put this to the test. All of the crew are ordered to beam down to Starbase 11. And Mr. Cogley goes down to deal with an issue as well. McCoy uses an auditory device. It's a microphone. But that's tied into the computer that can detect or remove human heartbeats from the system. Okay? So one by one, he masks all the people aboard the bridge. And what we find is that there's one heartbeat left on board. And that must be Finney. But then, so he goes out. Kirk says, let me handle this. Let me go take care of him. Which he goes down and he finds Finney. Kirk reveals that Cogley has just brought Finney's daughter aboard. Finney wants to blow up the ship and everybody on it. And this kind of confuses him. He doesn't know what to do. And it gives Kirk enough time to wrestle the phaser away from Finney and knock him out. After Finney gets secured, Kirk is able to repair the damage that Finney did and allows the Enterprise to regain a stable orbit. He was going to crash it into the planet. Kirk gets cleared of all the charges and is restored to full duty. And we find that the lieutenant, who is the JAG officer who was prosecuting Kirk, mentions that Cogley is now going to defend Finney at his court-martial for his actions against Kirk. Which is kind of appropriate when you think about it. It is. All right. So let's talk about this. First, I want to talk about Kirk's character. Kirk, I'm not going to say he goes through an arc, but he does show a plethora of emotions in this. For a moment that, you know, his career is on the line, he's really calm and a little cold at times, which I'm surprised about. What did you think of Kirk's character throughout this episode and the performance?
Well, I mean, this I think is where William Shatner really does a good job as Kirk. In this, it's a very restrained performance. It's definitely he downplays it.
Yeah.
This is not the over the top Captain Kirk that we sometimes like to have a good laugh about. But it's an interesting idea that Kirk, someone is trying to get revenge on Kirk. For Kirk being the good officer that he is.
Right.
So it's very interesting to see what Kirk does in this episode.
Well, I agree with you, but at the same time, I think of the more human aspect, the fact that Kirk's integrity, Kirk's ability as a leader, I'll even say it, his manhood is at question here because his identity is as a Starfleet captain. That is what he identifies as. And in the end, even when he becomes an admiral, what's the one thing he does really well? Be a Starfleet captain. Yes. When he is on the starbase and in the bar, or, you know, and the people are criticizing him, he's not really defending himself at all. He just lets it happen. And I don't know. I would think after a certain point in a more clear-headed and yet very witty way, because Kirk is very witty, I would think he would retort back and defend himself, and he doesn't. He just lets everyone else think what they want. And that is a good thing, but I still feel it's not the most human thing, especially when your very identity is being challenged right in front of you by your peers. That's got to be a rough place to be in, and he's a little more calm and cool than I would have thought he would be.
That's a fair point. That's a fair assessment. Yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. But the crux of this is it's a legal drama. So I want to play a little Legal Eagle here. So for those who've never heard of Legal Eagle is a online. He is an actual attorney. He is a very experienced attorney who has worked in multiple states, and I believe has even worked on a Supreme Court case. I can't remember, but he's done a lot. And what he does is he often will online talk about different legal principles, and oftentimes he'll look at movies and TV shows and see how accurate they are.
Oh, interesting.
So I wanted to ask myself, by the way, Measure of a Man, Legal Eagle's review of Measure of a Man. Highly recommend it. Watch that.
Oh, yes.
Great. But I wanted to take my hand, and I took some notes on some things that I think they get right, really right in this episode from a legal standpoint, and some things that are questionable. So let's start with the very principles of this episode, right? So, number one, a Starfleet commander is going to be investigated after a disaster. Every time. So, it absolutely makes sound sense. And if we're to say this is a paramilitary organization, they kind of follow this. This would happen in real life, too. Anytime you have a loss of personnel or destruction of equipment, negligent decisions, possible falsification of records, a commander is going to be investigated on this every single time. So I do really like that we addressed this. Like, there was a potential problem. Starfleet is on it. We're going to look into this. That's cool. And the idea that Kirk could face a court-martial for jettisoning the pod, that's plausible. Makes sense. The second thing that they bring up is the idea of the burden of command. The burden on a commanding officer is higher than anything else. Military law talks about how command officers have a very strict accountability. They are responsible for everything that happens with their subordinates, and their expectations are heightened even during crises. And this show does a really good job to show that even Kirk is not above scrutiny, which again, ethically and legally makes sense. So far, so good. I absolutely buy the premise of this episode. Makes sense to me. Evidence from official logs. Now, we're talking the computer here, right? If we're to count the computer as an official log, this makes real sense, too. The ship's computer functions like that. So we have black box recordings, operational logs, authenticated records. These are things that would be looked at that happen aboard a ship. Same in real life. Courts rely heavily on those official reports and those official records, unless there's evidence of tampering, which, until the end of the episode, we don't know that there is. Totally makes sense. And this is a tension in the episode. The main tension is the computer says Kirk is lying. It makes sense. We believe it. We understand it. We believe the computer to be infallible. Okay. So there's strong principles there. And then finally, the due process that exists. Kirk gets a lawyer. He's allowed to challenge the evidence. They're allowed to cross-examine the witnesses and to present alternative theories, even though his lawyer, I will say, feels a little inept at first. He doesn't cross-examine as often. And even the Commodore goes, you've had the opportunity to talk to these people. Why aren't you asking questions?
Very, very interesting.
But there is a point to it. I don't think it's wise, but sometimes you don't need to say new things or go into new things if it's not going to help your case. Why point it? But it makes sense. And the idea of a JAG officer mirrors real military. So all the procedures that we've got going in here, for the most part, kind of makes sense. The actual trial in itself feels a little weaker and unrealistic to me. There's a big conflict of interest going on here. Big one. The prosecutor, who is Lieutenant Shaw, is a former romance of Kirk's. This would absolutely disqualify her from prosecuting against Kirk.
Yes.
100%. modern ethics, that you can't have that. And to be fair, by the way, that's something in Measure of a Man I was always concerned about too, is the captain who prosecuted who oversaw the case. She had a conflict of interest because she had a relationship with Picard. And Picard I was like, I don't know how this works.
It doesn't quite work on a...
Right.
Yeah, because you're right, it's conflict of interest.
There's an appearance of impropriety, and then I feel like that's one of its biggest flaws, is your prosecutor shouldn't have been prosecuting this case in the first place.
Under legal circumstances, you want people who are impartial to the case.
And so the court itself seems to function a little more like a civilian drama than an actual military tribunal.
Good point, yes.
So we get a lot of dramatic speeches, a lot of speculation, a lot of loose evidence. We've got the surprise evidence. Those kinds of things would never happen in an actual tribunal, let alone a regular court case. That would never occur. Absolutely not. An actual military judge would highly regulate something being admissible, relevant, the scope of the witness's testimony, expert testimony. How they dealt with McCoy and his expert testimony was a travesty. He brought him in and said, "You are a doctor with a specialty as well in psychiatry. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Okay, so we're establishing him as a psychiatric professional." I don't have a problem with that. That makes sense. But when they ask his opinion about it, which you could do with an expert witness, they fumble the ball on how to deal with that.
True.
And it wasn't good. I mean, this really felt like a Perry Mason episode.
Unfortunately, the nature of putting a trial as a dramatic, an episode of dramatic television is difficult because if you were to do it by the book, it would not be as interesting for the audience to watch.
Oh, legal things are not interesting at all. They are boring. They are dull. And to make legal proceedings more interesting is a challenge to do in real life. Absolutely. But there are a couple more things here. The investigation of the actual incident is still happening while the trial is going on. And I gotta say, that one right there is not logistically reasonable at all. A trial takes time to build. It would maybe even be like a year or more until something possibly went to trial. And an investigation and discovery would have happened long before a trial was decided. They would have done discovery to go, okay, is there evidence to charge Kirk? Was there any evidence? There was some evidence. Okay, but it wouldn't have been that fast. And that evidence would have been vetted. They would have checked it. They would have understood, and what Spock did makes sense, but that would have been done in discovery, not during the trial. And defense would have been given those materials or anything beforehand. This did not occur. You don't pause a trial while you go, I'm going to go find the culprit. The trial goes on. So it's dramatic. It's overly dramatic. It's not realistic. A small thing, they had an even number of officers on the tribunal. That's odd. That's very odd.
Yeah, I would agree. There is a reason why, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court has nine members, so it's an odd number of members.
Right.
So that a decision can be reached.
And ties do happen when people abstain, or ties do occur. They do occur, but it's not likely. And then finally, Cogley's defense strategy itself is so theatrically weak.
Yes.
It's very memorable, it's very theatrical, but it's not realistic. He often appears unprepared. He uses rhetoric quite a bit. He attacks the computer on a philosophical level. And the only reason he wins is because Spock solved the mystery by himself. This attorney did nothing, except maybe buy some time. And a real defense attorney would focus on the chain of custody, the integrity of the evidence, the authentication, where the computer records authenticated, procedural defects, things like that. This attorney did not do any of that.
True.
Yeah. I rather like the attorney that was in Ad Astra Aspera. That attorney was better. Way better. But there are legal ideas in here that are intriguing. And I think it was a little ahead of its time when it was being made. They asked the question, can technological evidence be trusted? Absolutely. Now, that's a great question. That is something I like, because that is now more relevant today. Can computer records be altered? Do we blindly trust the automated system? And what happens when digital evidence conflicts with an eyewitness memory? These are actually real-life questions that have been asked. And with the advent of AI and it becoming slowly more and more realistic and powerful, we're not fully there yet, but it's getting there.
True.
These kinds of questions are interesting. And I love that in 1967, this was really forward-thinking for it.
It's true. Yes. We are living in that era when AI will probably intrude on many aspects of our society.
Well, I mean, so for me, on the core principles, the core ideas of what they're dealing with, it's pretty solid. The principles make sense. Kirk's got to be held accountable. An accident happened. There has to be accountability. Absolutely makes sense. The procedure is so heavily dramatized. The ethics of what's going on are a little questionable. But I did like the philosophy of it and the questions that it offered itself. Not too bad for a 1967 drama. But again, I kind of would put this on the line of a Perry Mason kind of thing.
Yes, I would agree.
But it's fun. It is a good episode. I like the dramatics. I like the tricks. And, you know, the how were they going to get Kirk out of this? I love that. But it does end up just being a revenge plot in the end. A little boring. It's a little boring, but we go with it. What are your final thoughts on this episode?
This is definitely Columbo, Matlock, Terry Mason. This is the kind of dramatized courtroom escapades that we as audiences rather enjoy.
If you want a really good military tribunal, we did Judgment at Nuremberg.
That was really good.
That is very good. I also recommend, though dramatized at sometimes, A Few Good Men is often shown to be a very good rendition. Though, again, some dramatization, it needed some help. And surprisingly, My Cousin Vinny. Also a very good, not military, but... Two Utes. Yeah, I love all of these movies. In fact, ironically, this morning I was making my breakfast, and I just was watching the You Can't Handle the Truth scene. I love that scene so much.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, next week, it's movie night here on the ship. And we're going into, with the year of the captain, we're going to take a look at Kate Mulgrew in the dark comedy Throw Mama from the Train. Interesting. I love this film. I grew up with this film, so I can't wait to discuss it. And we're going to have our good friend Jeff on as well. Jeff's going to be with us to talk a little bit about it. So that will be great. And then the week after, we're going Next Generation. Yay, Next Gen. All right. Wheel of Morality, turn. Tell us the season that we should burn. We are taking a look at Season 4, Episode 24, The Mind's Eye. I think this is the one that Geordi gets brainwashed.
I believe so.
I think this is the Geordi brainwashing episode. Cool, I like this one.
It's the Manchurian candidate.
We're getting into some political intrigue here. Oh, that is great. Brennan, where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me on Blue Sky and redwire.bluesky.social. You can find me on Instagram and Threads and Reddit Blue. But you can finally mostly recovering from the Andorian shingles on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts at Page Turners They Were Not.
And you can find me on Twitch and Twitter at CIngle1984. But as always, we end every episode. Kapra! And live long and prosper.
Peace and long life.